As dedicated allies to the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, we at EduCanNation recognize the vast sovereign, unsurrendered, and treaty territories from the east to the west coast. We acknowledge the First Peoples of Turtle Island to be the original and rightful land owners, land caretakers, and land healers to what we know to be Canada. Through an ever-growing network of partners and supporters, we at EduCanNation sincerely aim to continually work and learn how to be diverse and responsive in supporting the various wellness needs of Indigenous communities. Welcome to ECN Talks, brought to you by EduCanNation, Canada's first and only association of certified cannabis educators. EduCanNation is dedicated to delivering the highest standard of responsible cannabis education, supporting respect for holistic plant medicine. We're patients supporting patients, caregivers, and a growing network of cannabis coaches and educators because we've been there, been through it, and understand that there's more to cannabis than what we've been told. Stigma, myths, and disinformation have clouded more minds than any puff of cannabis smoke. So these conversations are to help clear the air while we celebrate the plant, the people, and the science behind cannabis by sharing stories, insights, and practical guidance to help you navigate the world of holistic plant medicine safely and confidently. Whether you're here to learn, explore, or just satisfy your curiosity, consider this your monthly dose of cannabis literacy without the hype, the smoke, or the stigma. EduCanNation is here to offer straight-up education you can trust. All right. Hello. Welcome.
Hey.
Well, hi again. Welcome back, everyone. This is episode 3 of ECN Talks, and we're really excited to be back with you. Just want to say thank you again to all our listeners for being here. We obviously would not be doing this without you, so we're very grateful, and we want you to be following, please, KGL Network on YouTube. Ring that bell so that you can get notifications when a new episode of ECN Talks drops. So thank you so much, everyone, for the support. And we're really excited to bring you these conversations. That's what this is, conversations for the elevated mind. And these are the conversations that we've been having behind the scenes at EduCanNation, whether it's at our water cooler or our business support group or our Friday speaker series events. And we've always said that we want to bring these conversations to you. We wish we could record them so that you could hear them. So here we are, and that's what we're doing. We're unscripted, we're unfiltered, and we're unedited. So we'll maybe a little bit of editing thanks to our production, Reverend Kelly. Thank you. So I think we covered a lot of the logistics in the first 2 episodes about who we are and what we do. And if you don't know who we are and what we do, then we really encourage you to go back to those episodes and check them out. And we're going to dive right into today's episode. Before we start off, I'm just going to remind everybody who I am. You can see my name there. I'm JJ O'Brien, and I'm the Executive Director of EduCanNation Cannabis Education, Inc., and we are a nonprofit organization here in Canada that's dedicated to promoting the highest standard of responsible education. And today I'm here with
Shawna Dunbar, co-founder and executive director at EduCanNation. I've been at it for many years now. Really excited that we are here doing these podcasts, getting our voices out there, and even more excited to be inviting our next guest onto the show. Josée Bourgeois has been a board member with us we're going on 3 years now. We've been working together, and she really does bring a lot to our team, helps us connect in ways with different communities that we haven't been able to do before she joined our team. She holds our policy and advocacy folder, and I'm really excited to welcome her, and I'm going to give it away to her to introduce herself because she is a lot more than just a cannabis advocate. So, hey, Josée, welcome.
Welcome.
Ikwe, Kakina, Josée Indigenous, Pequawknigon, Nadojaban, Anishinaabe Ikwe, Anishinaabe Aki. Hello, my name is Josée. I'm from Pequawknigon, and I am an Algonquin woman from Algonquin land. And I just want to say that listening to that intro made me so proud in so many ways. I mean, not only because there's a very sincere and truthful land acknowledgement, but everything that was said about the organization just made me, I was just kind of sitting here looking out my window like, yeah, this is awesome. Very grateful to be here.
So you had a big hand in that as well. So many thanks to you.
You wrote that for us. We had a land acknowledgement, but it was kind of thin. And you helped it make it more meaningful. So we're proud to be able to use that every time we open up.
Thank you.
One of the small contributions that you have made in comparison to everything else. So take it away. Who are you? Where do you come from? How did you get to cannabis? Because you've worn so many hats. We've gotten to know about you. So yeah, share it with our audience.
Well, then I'll give a little bit of a timeline. Growing up in Toronto, high school was for me like 99 into the early 2000s. And cannabis culture really had a door kicked down because of Snoop Dogg, which obviously there's a whole history and legacy that comes from the Jamaican culture, which obviously we got to know about a little bit growing up in Toronto because it's such a diverse city. My pot dealer in high school was a Bayesian man from Barbados. And he taught me a lot about the cess plant because he didn't really have access to hydro. So growing up as a teenager, I only got hydro from, other random sources, but mostly it was smoking cess, which was like a really, more conservative, safe way, I guess, to. Oh, sounds like someone flushed their toilet.
It happened to us last time.
Was there sound effects on this? Anyways, so, the Chronic 2001 album, Snoop Dogg, Eminem, Dr. Dre, that whole scene, it was such a huge influence on every single person that you could see. JJ's like, yep. So that was really my introduction, which was all recreational. It was all social, just to stay on track with this though, with cannabis, it would have fluctuated a little bit for me. And I think I didn't really become like a consistent user until I was in my early stages of being a mom. And to be honest with you, that was very difficult because not only was I living on a reserve, but, this was how many years ago? I had my son in 2009. So I faced a lot of discrimination from people, regardless of how much of an amazing community I lived in at the time, which was in Nova Scotia. If I had more time today, we would get into the actual details, but I actually had someone call Child Family Services on me.
Wow.
Specifically for smoking weed. And they knew without a doubt that there was absolutely nothing else going on in the home. So they were specifically trying to target me as being a cannabis user as a young mom. I get it, considering just what society is and how things are handled, and especially the perceptions of young Indigenous women on reserve having babies. So that was really crazy. Fast forward to working. I went to college real late. I didn't graduate high school. I went to college as a mature student. I graduated as valedictorian at the Nova Scotia Community College from a recreation leadership program. Thank you. My son was super young, and I was just 28, 29 years old, something like that, probably 28. And right away started working for a federal prison, the Nova Scotia Women's Correctional Institution. And lots of different things I did there. I could give you a whole resume, but at the end of the day, a big takeaway from that time there was being very saddened by seeing the zombification of all these women, all different ages, right? Young, pretty girls coming in, 19 years old, made some really bad decisions. Then they were on that methadone and Suboxone line. And you have women that had been, sentenced to life in prison, and they're so far gone because there was no interaction with them in any other manner, which was what made my job there so special, because I was there. I ended up being like, I'll name my own job, even though it had a very technical term as being a social program officer. I was like a movement mentor to these women. I got them fucking moving. I got them in the gym. I got them dancing. I got them laughing. I got them moving, whether it was yoga, hip hop, Zumba, like powwow dancing, you name it, and through this, like the human side of everybody would come out, and you would learn people's stories. Personal reasons, I ended up leaving Nova Scotia in 2014, and I moved, I ended up in KZ, in Kitigan-Zibi, which is an Algonquin reserve on the past the Gatineau side of Ottawa. And I started working at a Health Canada funded First Nations drug and alcohol rehabilitation center called the Wanakee Center. And they take First Nations, Métis, and Inuit from all over Canada to come and do their programs. They have bilingual programs there, like French and English. And their approach to things is not really just like a 50-50 Western and Indigenous holistic approach. I'd say it's like way more on like the 75-25 perhaps. Okay. And so, there were so many beautiful things that I gained from working there as an accreditation coordinator. But then I started doing the same kind of work with the clients after hours, started doing a bunch of movement classes with them. And obviously in that environment, the medication management program was quite significant. And, there was a nurse in a nurse's office, and a big part of my job for Accreditation Canada was to look at the medication and make sure that there was a systematic approach that fell to the standards and guidelines of Health Canada. Mm-hmm. So I would see nothing but prescription medications being handled. They're certainly not handling tinctures and CBD oils, Mm-hmm. So back then, that would have been in like 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. And then in Pikwakanagan, there started to be individuals who were very proactive in a grassroots manner and took advantage of the land that they had access to and started to build dispensaries. When legalization happened, basically on the other side of the veil, which is on reservation land, sovereign land, everybody was looking at each other and just being like, you know what, we're going all in, like we're doing this. And everybody started doing it at the same time. So it literally mm-hmm. became almost impossible for law enforcement to like do something about it. And at the same, anyway, so as you can see in an introduction, we're going to get into like the whole conversation. So that's kind of like, I got into cannabis at the end of 2019, like the tail end. I even moved to Pikwakanagan. And my journey started. I started working for a manufacturing and distribution company that became what is today Sweetgrass Trading. Mm-hmm. And they're established on the First Nations. Today, they're a manufacturer of many different brands. Their distribution network is quite large over the eastern part of the nation-to-nation trade route. And my job was to help them establish that. So to be a community engagement manager is where things started, and then eventually evolved into brand development, which is where I was a huge part in developing the brand Aki Wellness, which is a huge line of every type of cannabis competitive product that is out there, made under the brand of Aki Wellness. So mm-hmm. that took me until probably 2022, and then started doing some conference routes, you know, and then eventually met EduCanNation. Without getting into everything right now, that's like the little.
We met at the Can Expo that Kelly, Reverend Kelly, had helped organized and gave such an amazing community feel about, and we all came out of it with this great sense of community and wanting to work together. And I think I don't know what I did to twist your arm to join us, but you did, and we're so grateful that you did. And so we'll dive in a minute more into what the heck is the sovereign industry? What does that mean? You'll help enlighten us and enlighten our viewers, and we'll just take a quick commercial break.
EduCanNation, a Canadian non-profit organization devoted to improving the quality of cannabis education and care across our nation and around the world. EduCanNation believes in continued education and support through the 3-tiered membership: cannabis education and outreach services, patient education and support through their holistic clinic model. EduCanNation, providing the highest standard of professional and responsible cannabis education. www.educanation.info.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We are here with our guest, Josée Bourgeois. And yes, hello, and thank you for the background and the introduction about yourself. It's very important to know all of our history, I find, when it comes into the, you know, when we talk about how we come into the cannabis space, because it's usually our histories that, you know, define where we end up. Very much so. That's how it happened for many of us. And I know that, you know, your important history is what has brought you to where you are today, being an advocate within the sovereign market. So, or sovereign industry. And I think it would be important to enlighten our listeners to, you know, what exactly is the sovereign industry and why is it important?
Well, it's important because it is a living example and exercise of our self-determination and the inherent rights in which that we carry. And the sovereign market is a nation-to-nation trade route that is established from all across the Canadian borders, East Coast to West Coast, and different First Nations are involved in different ways. Some are involved in the trade, some are involved just in the sale of having dispensaries. And I think that the sovereign industry has had a tremendous amount of growth where most Canadians are aware of the presence, but they don't understand that the questioning of the validity of the industry is a reflection of their own ignorance and lack of information.
Thank you for sharing that. And so I think it would be good to distinguish as well, like, what is the difference between what is known as the recreational or medical market and the sovereign? Like, what are the differences between them?
Well, and maybe also, sorry, just to bring in also like the illicit market or the legacy market, because I think often there's a lot of confusion for people. Like you say, it's ignorance. It's just a lack of understanding. And often the sovereign market is lumped in with the illicit or legacy market because it's not the federal market or, provincial market, medical, recreational, whatever. So help enlighten us.
I mean, if I go back to the way that I was always talking in the very beginning, that was always a very preliminary question, is even like maybe these terms have even evolved since then. But I remember using in conversation like green market, red market, gray market. That was very like early days, 2020. And it was a valid way of distinguishing that the green market was like all systems go. The government says it's okay. Right. And then the red market, in one sense, is like red tape bad, like, shouldn't be there. Don't go. But in the sense, it's an exercise on the term of me being the Red Nation, being First Nations. I guess I don't really know a more substantial way of explaining the red other than just the obvious. And the gray market being like this gray area where if we know a little bit about cannabis, we know that there was a legacy of people before any of the government interference or before the establishment of the sovereign market. There was a whole other industry, and this is where all the respect needs to go to certain groups of people that are not usually represented as well, like the Black community, people from Jamaica, Rastafarian culture, all of that. There's such a huge homage that needs to go to those individuals, and we just don't know those things. So when we talk about the gray market in today's terms under the conversation of legalization, it's now referred to as the illicit market. Even within the sovereign market, there was a lot of, just to speak quickly, I'll use the word help, support, from the gray market, from the illicit market, from the legacy market into the red market, into the sovereign market. And eventually to the point now where it's maybe the lesser that there's any involvement in the two. Like, I think that there's been a big growth where the sovereign market really does stand on its own. But not to get into like a more of an explanation than needed on that question. I think that that's where the conversation was in 2020. And now I think people are using the term sovereign market way more than they were before.
And is that appropriate? Like, is
yes.
that?
Yes, okay. It's the Indigenous cannabis market. It's the Indigenous because technically, it's not just First Nations that have Indigenous inherent rights. It's true Métis people and true Inuit people as well. So that's where the term Indigenous would come from, in the conglomerating of those three beautiful heritages of peoples. So the sovereign market and Indigenous cannabis market is totally fine, I would say.
And is the sovereign market highly regulated like the, medical or recreational market is?
No. Like in a nutshell, the quick answer would be no. Because sovereignty isn't something that you legislate. Sovereignty isn't something that you create bylaws on. But this is what I was saying earlier before, it's a case-by-case situation. Like if we were to have a bird's eye view of the map and like literally like, soar over like all the different territories, there's going to be all these different conversations that are happening. Some communities right off the bat, they had chief and councils that were like, yep, we don't care what anyone says. We are going to create a bylaw. Maybe they involved the community in some sort of like ratification vote or some kind of community discussion where they came up with these guidelines. But I would say that's more of a rarity, because when these bylaws came out right away, they were certainly coming from a compliance standpoint. And the compliance I'll talk about it all day long when it comes to safety and packaging and this and that and the other. But there is, you know, some discussions that need to be had about individual band members exercising the fact that they own their own parcels of land privately. Therefore, their Indigenous inherent right to become self-determined off a natural resource, they can create that economy and have a cannabis business. Now, does the said elected chief and council, for whatever reason, did they write a bylaw that infringes on that individual truthful concept of sovereignty? Are they trying to monopolize, or are they trying to really control? And in some reserves, there's only allowed one. And that one is either sometimes sovereign, and they are supplied through the sovereign trade route through the other manufacturers. And in other First Nations, that one, they're licensed with Health Canada. You know, but how successful are these shops anyways that they are on First Nations? Let's exclude the one that has the license with Health Canada, because obviously there's a shit ton of money going to you know who, whereas all of that money, because it's a lot, the 6% of what they're making, if you take that and you throw it back into the pile of sovereign businesses that are not anything to do with Health Canada or the government, their capacity to change lives, employ people, and give back to the community in very innovative, sustainable ways is what has made the sovereign industry sustainable over all this time internally, regardless that no matter where you go, there's a different model going on. That's what I can say on that for now.
Yeah, well, I think that that's what's important for us to understand, is that it's not being governed in the same way that we're used to, right? As Canadians, that we're like, okay, there's the legal market, there's the recreational side, there's the medical side. That's confusing enough for, you know, us to differentiate and help people understand. Yeah. And we throw in, like you spoke to, the legacy market and then the sovereign market. And we just, as, you know, Canadians, we understand the regulations that are set forward. We go by legislation. We follow the laws and all of this, or we choose to break them. But we don't have this understanding of what sovereignty means.
And a perfect example would be my reserve, Pikwakanagan, because we have had individuals who created business from the very beginning and are still in business today. And we have multiple dispensaries on our reserve. I think almost 13. I think we have 13. And we're a very small community. And we don't have a bylaw. We don't have anything that says left, right, up, and down. And the joke internally has been like, oh, it's the Wild West out there then. No. I mean, the culture of a community says a lot. You know, and not to say that Pikwakanagan doesn't have its issues, because, well, folks, let me tell you something. When you drive onto this beautiful Algonquin Reserve, an hour and 45 minutes west of the nation's capital, which is Ottawa, what you're going to see is red paint across our sign that used to welcome you. And it says, state of emergency, opioid epidemic, expect heavy police presence. And it's been there for years. At this point, it's not going anywhere. Why is it not going anywhere? Well, because the prescription epidemic is still fucking here and strong.
For sure. And there's an opioid epidemic, yet we're turning our noses at cannabis. That when we speak about cannabis within the sovereign market, there's almost sometimes this negative connotation, but there's a lot of positives to it as well. Like, have you seen some positives within your own community with cannabis coming in?
Employment, stability, people having a sense of relief. And I was even one of these people, a sense of relief that you don't have to drive to the city to have a job that pays well. You don't have to be a highway slave driving 5 hours a day to go work a 7-hour shift just to go make that money. And then you don't have to fight for a job at the band office, because you're not going to get one, because when you get one 30 years ago, you're not going anywhere. You're going to retire out of that job, and there's not many.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's gas stations. Thankfully, the gas stations are so successful, they pay really well.
That's good.
Yeah. So that's important. And I think, I saw it even in my own community when our municipal government chose not to allow cannabis business to come into, a small town. And I thought it was such a shame because of what you just pointed out, like just the potential for employment. But what about, let's talk more about the opioid crisis. And the three of us have sat in meetings with, all the wonderful people you've introduced us to, and we've had the opportunity to have some good conversations. And there's always kind of like two sides. There's like the side of openness, and then there's this side of that I think is just, stigma, fear-based, lack of education, not really understanding the plant and what it is and what it the capacities that it holds. We're seeing more of a willingness, people opening up to the idea of utilizing cannabis, let's say, to replace things like methadone when we're talking about opioid addiction. Can you address a little bit what some of those barriers are as far as just an understanding of the plant and a connection, or a lack of connection that maybe some Indigenous people feel towards cannabis?
Well, it's indoctrination. Don't even have to think about that. The church is responsible for that. And it's not just Indigenous people. It's the prohibition of the plant. It is, but specifically, not to tilt her away, but to say specifically on your question, the church is responsible for a lot of the way that we think and fear. They are so responsible for our numbness, our senseless feeling of hope, of hopelessness. So there is such a good job that's been done with the language.
Mm-hmm.
And part of my experience over the years of doing community engagement, wow, it's a thing. That's not our medicine. Don't bring drugs in here, and they're coming from a place of like, that's the devil's lettuce in the sense of like, it's not spiritual. It is, drugs are part of the escape. You're trying to be with the devil. You're trying to have the evil spirits sit with you.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of this talk, and obviously it comes from a bit of an older generation. And then an interesting thing happens. People who have really close relationships with the elderly community, they feel bound to protect, the overall wellness of said person and not upset them. Let's not upset them with this talk, And when it comes to even, people in a leadership position, historically, I love my people, but I'm gonna say, unless there's a lot of really young people on the council, there's probably gonna be a historical precedent of not having a lot of awkward conversations.
Which means not a lot of change moving forward.
Not a lot of change, a lot of avoidance, and a lot of, and we heard it. It's not about individual will or individual realization and knowing. It's about influencing the collective will is the hard part. And in leadership, a lot of the times that's a hard thing to do. So I feel like maybe I trailed off a little bit in my answer there.
No, but it's, you're drawing attention to the fact that, a lot of people still believe that cannabis is a drug
And
yes. And more importantly, to bring it back to the first thing that I said, is that with residential school, especially, and the assimilation of First Nations people done by the church, done by priests, done by nuns, done by the government, done by other government institutions, schools, everything, we were beaten, and our brain chemical was even changed a little bit over time to look at a connection to the land as being voodoo, as being black magic, as being ungodly, as, you know, and that is our entire existence of who we are. And so because there was such a good job at indoctrination and brainwashing by the church, we still suffer intergenerationally from not being able to break out of this stigma language. And this is one of the reasons why when I came across EduCanNation, it really was like a moment, because here I am, like, it's like beating a dead horse, because you know how many times I was put into a situation of being like, you're crossing the line, young lady. You need to watch how you speak to our elders, or, you know, something like, because I'm challenging, or because I'm talking about, just because I'm even mentioning cannabis, you know? So I realized that the common denominator at a political level, leadership level, community level, individual level, everyone suffers from knowing nothing about cannabis.
Yeah, and you're right. Like, it's not, you know, it's not individual to Indigenous communities. I mean, we're up against the same thing, right? It doesn't matter what community we go into, whether it's the medical community, or you know, a retirement home community, or, you know, school community, you name it. There's just this huge level of ignorance, which is, of course, why we came together, right? We've all had this shared experience of being up against a lack of education, and it inhibits us from moving forward because we're not speaking the same language, right? We don't have the same understanding of what this plant is, and what its potential is. And we've been conditioned to believe that it's a drug and that it's a bad thing, et cetera, et cetera. And it impedes us from moving forward. So,
but one of the most beautiful thing is, and JJ, Shawna, maybe you guys saw this too, when we've been having these conversations with Indigenous people, when the connection is made about the endocannabinoid system and how we are raised, and we pride ourselves on our knowing of our bodies and our connection to our four elements, our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual, but we don't know nothing about an entire mechanism within our body to receive this plant.
Yes. I say, if we deny cannabis, we are denying ourselves. We are denying our very nature. We are literally turning away from ourselves because we have a system in our bodies designed to interact with it. And it was here first. So, and I find it sadly ironic, because I see so many similarities between the prohibition of cannabis and the prohibition of Indigenous culture by the powers that be. There so many similarities there, and I feel badly that we've kind of fallen for it, in a sense. Like, we've allowed the stigma to take over and to lead the conversation, unfortunately.
And now that it affects everybody, regardless of what your postal code is, you know, it's the way she goes. You know, in one sense, people are really understanding that respectful existence of Indigenous people, Indigenous ways of knowing. But in many other ways, very opposite things are happening too. So.
But so focusing on the positive, like over the last few years, you've spoken on a lot of different stages. We went to a conference together, and you spoke and you talked. You literally told the audience how tired you were of repeating yourself over and over again. And it's like, you want to get this
You got a
message
standing ovation for it.
And the room was, I can tell you, the room was absolutely silent. Everybody was just captivated by what you were saying, and you could see on people's faces this, like, all of a sudden going from pure ignorance into a state of starting to know, starting to understand, which is amazing. So can you share a little bit about, like, some of the positive things that have come out through your advocacy over the last few years?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, first I'll start with just cannabis being present in my community. Besides the jobs and whatnot and the things that I mentioned like that before, reciprocity has been something for sure. And one initiative that I'll always mention is Sweetgrass Trading's meal delivery program. It's still happening. People are like, you've mentioned that so many times. It's like, yeah, because they're still doing it, guys. They're still feeding the community. They're still making home cooked meals. The whole kitchen from the manufacturing facility gets taken over. I think it's every Tuesday or every other Tuesday, something like that. And the whole day, the whole staff transitions to making food. And then they deliver these to an enormous amount of families on the reserve.
Wow.
And so, I mean, I remember back in the day, like when I used to get like these little like mommy gift baskets delivered from the reserve in Millbrook, like milk tokens. You go to the gas station and go get your free milk, but like it just helps so much. Free food, free groceries, like especially nowadays, like that's just, big gold star for me in that sense when I think of that. For myself that I've experienced, people who are hard to talk to, people who are very like, breaking them down, keeping at it. And because it's just truth and facts, you'll never run out of steam when you're talking truth on facts, So it's just been inspiring to see people in other parts of the region out here. They now know me a little bit for doing cannabis stuff, which is cool, and that makes people go, why isn't my reserve doing this? And we'll have really interesting conversations, and I'll tell them really specific, interesting questions to be asking the next time you guys have a community meeting. I've had people inbox me and ask me for encouragement so they can know how to articulate conversations with people or leadership. And the big institutions, like the big goals, nobody has said no to at least talking about cannabis education. Nobody's really
chipping away, right? You keep at it and you're chipping away. And I've seen just through our relationship over the last few years that some of the doors that you've been knocking on since we've known each other for the same reason. Please listen to us. We have some education. Hello. We're getting those meetings. Like you didn't give up, and your knowledge of the plant and how it interacts with your body and everything has increased over the years, and which kind of makes you more excited about it too. And then you're sharing that, and that's breaking down those barriers. So that's education, right? Where do you feel that education is most needed? As like, if we could break it down maybe into different, what's the word I'm listening to, thinking of different demographics of people within your community who would benefit the most from education.
Learning what I've learned, which is like a fingernail compared to all the rest of you women in this organization when it comes to the science of the plant, amongst other things. But as a mom, I think it's a disservice to not be educating preteens and teens about the endocannabinoid system, because I think that it's like you uncoolify weed smoking a little bit as like a minor, let's just speak in technical terms, when you learn about it, you know? It's like this thing that like gets you high and is amongst all the other party things that happen in your circle of friends, then like it's fun and it's like la 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 and we're just being young, you know? But if I knew at 16 about my endocannabinoid system and how I can mess it up even, and how actually if I was conscious about my dosing and how that could help me, I probably wouldn't have been in certain ways for certain amounts of time, and on top of that doing other substances because it's all a party. You know?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I know that's been, I mean, you know, my story with my son and having cannabis in the house since childhood, right? And having to navigate that with other kids coming over, right? All the other teenagers seeing the plants growing and all of that, right? And so just offering education and never telling them, you know, drugs are bad, don't smoke pot, or, you know, doing that sort of thing. Just, you know, hey, did you know you had an endocannabinoid system, right? And that learning, I saw kids who were partying hard and overdoing it and, you know, potentially doing harm to themselves in the sense of, you know, just their overall well-being and being able to navigate being an adolescent to begin with is difficult. But I saw changes in those kids, like taking a step back without being told to, you know, stopping the partying so hard and learning to respect the plant and its capacity to be a medicine, because they had this friend of theirs who was using it for his seizures, right? It was like a whole new perspective. Wait a second, it's not just a party drug. I think that's, well, you know, I hold that close to my heart. I think.
Absolutely. The other thing I would say, like outside of my own personal bubble, like community lens wise, I'm always going to have a focus on trying to access the health center departments on First Nations communities, because when you live on the res, you don't have a family doctor. There's no family doctors. Unless you want to drive yourself into town and you've gotten yourself a family doctor, which yes, some people do, but sometimes First Nations communities, that's just that distance isn't feasible. You end up having a nurse practitioner who ends up knowing everything about you. And, there's no practice outside of just a regular prescription relationship. And anytime you try to talk, even throughout, this is a good example. So obviously the same staff at the healthcare center have worked there before legalization and now. And even with what they see happening on the First Nations here, it's work to try to get even a conversation about cannabis education, because there's such a disconnect. There is a lot of First Nations people from a certain generation who do not use cannabis. They absolutely do not. They never did that. And maybe, no substance at all, or perhaps more favor to thinking alcohol is more socially acceptable. But there's so many people who work in healthcare, and you guys know this, it's not a First Nations thing, who don't know a friggin' first thing about cannabis. And they're the gatekeepers to me, just bringing in education on a subject of an industry that clearly has a medicinal existence. So what's the barrier? What is it? It can't just
education.
It has to be it's choice.
Yep.
It's decision. It's people who are in the position to make the decisions to say, no, we're not doing that.
Or to choose to be ignorant.
Yep. Yeah, well, it's stigma. It's so deeply ingrained in us. I mean, even those of us who are in the space and preach the good word of cannabis plant, we're also personally stigmatized still on certain levels, right? So let's take another commercial break, and then let's dive into our awoke dose. Sorry, which is we're starting to collect questions from our viewers so that we can address them.
You know, one of the biggest areas for growth in the cannabis industry is actually cannabis hospitality. And did you know you can start your own business for under $5,000? Allow me to take you through my mentorship program to receive your cannabis hospitality stewardship certificate, where we're going to allow you to understand this plant in a way in which you can actually shepherd the plant to people. And not only a way to start a new career, but a way to actually enrich people's lives so they can use the benefits of cannabis to enhance their lifestyle. Please join me on this revolutionary journey.
All right, welcome back again. We are here with our Awoke Dose portion where we answer questions from our viewers. And Shawna, what's our question this month?
Our question comes actually from one of our community members, Mary Vermette, and I think it's a very poignant question and so relatable to today's conversation. And it is, how can communities use cannabis education to combat stigma and misinformation? What do you think, Jay?
Yes. Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you very much, Maria, for that question. And I know the first thing that came to my mind when I read it is just all of the stigma and misinformation that I was faced with when I was researching about cannabis when I was experiencing my cancer crisis. And I spent a lot of time. The first place I went to for information was online, Facebook, online forums, asking questions. And that was not the best choice that I made. I had to sift through a lot of, opinions, a lot of hearsay, and a lot of just straight up misinformation to get to the actual credible information. So, it's really important to be aware of where you are getting your education from. I would not advise going to any Facebook groups or online forums to ask questions that are like crucial to your health and to your life, especially when it comes to dealing with cancer and things like that. I know if you go to any online forum and you ask, hey, what can I do naturally for cancer? And you will get 100 answers in 5 minutes. So you have to be very discerning. So I would just say to make sure that you are getting your information from credible sources, like us here at EduCanNation. We might not be medical professionals, but we come from backgrounds in science, research, herbalism, and autocracy, and we have spent years educating ourselves, and we can do that for you as well. So if you need some brushing up on your cannabis education or you need some guidance or assistance, then reach out to us at educanationinc@gmail.com. And Shawna, what did you think about that question? How can communities use cannabis education to combat stigma and misinformation?
Well, I think, just to reiterate what you're saying, having access to credible education and content is really like the starting point that we need to navigate our way through. You Google something and you can get all sorts of different pieces of information, especially with AI at play right now. And people tend to just kind of read the top line. Oh, okay. And they believe that, right? So, I mean, my story of trying to navigate all that with my son and getting proper guidance and information for his epilepsy. It was huge. But the more I learned and the more I was able to share knowledge, knock on doors, like with the medical professionals that I was dealing with, right? a lot of them were anti-cannabis. That's what they were led to believe. It was a drug. Never mind the drugs that they were drugging my kid with, that never mind weren't helping with the seizures, but they had all these other side effects, right? That they also weren't providing education on. So it was, breaking through that stigma. And, I love that Josée mentioned earlier, just seeing people's faces when they hear you have an endocannabinoid system, right? It's like this light bulb goes off. I always say that I see it with my patients. I see it with medical professionals. It's sticking to the facts, sticking to the science, and just sharing that knowledge, and reminding people it's a plant, like just a plant. We call it weed for a reason. It grows like a weed, and has all these incredible properties, not just for us as humans, but for the earth, right? For it's soil remediation. We can use it for building materials. We can make plastics that biodegrade and give back to the earth when they're done. There's so much potential there. So I think just sharing our knowledge, and making sure that we're sourcing that information from credible places is how we can combat stigma. And I think, Josée, you spoke to that as well. Do you want to reiterate or jump on anything else?
I guess I was just thinking it's about that access to wellness. By talking about cannabis, I think the dependency on a Western medical system, which has clearly established itself as one of the main institutions on a reservation, you're going to have a health center and a band office. That's a guarantee. And so, the dependency on that, especially in rural communities, is quite extensive. So I think for me, I just sit on like I seen the bigger picture. The more we talk about cannabis and people who are in the position of healthcare providers, there's just such a positive effect that will come. And in our communities, that's definitely a need. We have, old age homes. We have retirement homes. We have, one of the first things that I mentioned, something I experienced as a young mom. And I'm only talking about cannabis use. I'm not talking about any other, I'm not talking about substance use. I'm talking about cannabis use. There would be a big advantage to destigmatizing in the healthcare and in the legal realm. Obviously, getting into the whole incarceration for being charged with dope. That's a whole other tragedy and a whole other conversation. But what I mean specifically, the removal of children.
Yeah.
I'm sure I got lucky in the sense of the things that I was able to articulate and the things that I was able to prove and just withstand the conversations. And at the time I had an amazing job. So it was a really a stressful situation. But yeah, I think about that, I didn't deserve that. And I didn't deserve to be questioned. I'm the best mom ever, excuse me. So, and probably because cannabis helped me out throughout the time.
That's a key point. I think there's kind of it's almost like a counterculture or something. I don't really know how to call it, but we're seeing, go on social media, go on Facebook. There are groups of moms who are getting together to just be able in a safe space to share their experiences of how cannabis helps them be a better mom, how it helps them be more patient, how it helps them focus their energies on their relationship with their children and manage the daily stresses of motherhood, especially in this day and age for women, right? We're expected to have careers, we're expected to be moms, we're supposed to, take care of the household, et cetera, et cetera. It's a lot, and cannabis can sometimes be a great tool. And then making women feel ashamed for that is terrible. It's certainly not productive.
Yeah,
right?
definitely counterproductive.
Education,
Or how about this? Do you know how many couples I know fight about cannabis use? It's a real problem.
Hmm.
And men out there, you're really annoying. Your girlfriends fucking smoke. Oh my god. Oh, it's been it's been interesting.
Well, yeah, that's the stigma and that's the double standard, right? I'm sure they say nothing about, having a beverage at the end of the day to unwind, like an alcoholic beverage.
It's
but
not just men, sorry. It's both sides. But.
yeah.
For sure. So, yeah, I mean, I think we all agree that the best way to use education about cannabis is just to use it, right? Like to make sure that it's incredibly enforced and keep sharing your stories, right? Jay always reminds me, because I get tired of hearing myself tell the same story over and over again. It's just like, yeah, but not everybody's heard it. And it can be really empowering to somebody else who is in, a similar situation to you, to hear you share how cannabis, changed your life, right? So to our audience, keep sharing, make sure that you're accessing credible information. There's a lot of good resources out there. We're one of them, EduCanNation, of course. And, if you're looking for great access to peer-reviewed cannabis research, go to CannaKeys. They're one of our partners. We rely on them a great deal for accessing reviewed research. It helps us so much. Yeah, reach out to us. And Josée, I'd love to open up the floor to you to just share any closing remarks that you might have.
I just want to take this opportunity to highlight the knowing that I have come to accept in talking about sovereign cannabis and talking about sovereignty on whatever platform it is. It incurs debate. It incurs people having an opinion. And I just want to make something clear. I love to be alive. I'm glad to exist. I happen to exist on this part of the land, as do all of you. And whether we want to accept it or not, Canadians have been indoctrinated, in a sense. They have been censored information through the curriculums in the education system. Everyone always wants to ask, what can we do to support Indigenous people? And I'm not making fun of the question. Quit wearing an orange t-shirt once a year. Quit celebrating Thanksgiving and not acknowledging the true history of Thanksgiving. And when it comes to land debates and land claims happening in this country, understand that there's been treaties that supersede the formation of the country, and there are Indigenous inherent rights that are established and will never go anywhere. And you can either be on the side of a person amongst the rest of us who simply uplifts this truth, because that's a really good starting point. I think that if people just started there, instead of wearing the orange t-shirts, that would be a really good cultural change. And I think that I know that when we talk about land, there's all these different things happening, and people are afraid of the land back movement, thinking that they're going to get kicked out of their homes. Do yourself a favor and don't simplify the situation to that basic of a ridiculous argument. At the end of the day, First Nations people, we're here to take care of the land for the 7 generations to come, so that all of our grandchildren, including yours, have a planet to actually live on. And I think what I'm trying to say at the end of the day is just simply talking about sovereign cannabis. It's focused. And it's things that people don't want to hear. But like I said earlier, facts based on truth are simply that. And if we can remove our feelings from what we've come to think Canada is, that's being an ally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very well said. And you shared that on that stage the last time we were together at a conference, and I think it hit home for a lot of people. And I love how you put just the idea of recognizing that recognition, right? You helped me through my difficulty with Thanksgiving celebrations and how far we've come from what they're supposed to be about, and in that, in being able to truly make a land acknowledgement and a personal acknowledgement with my family, everybody's eyes were opened. Like there was it was giving a new perspective to something that we have been I don't know, brainwashed into thinking, right? This lack of understanding, lack of knowledge, massive level of ignorance. So I love that. Just opening ourselves up to learning and acknowledging, whether it's about our Indigenous brothers and sisters, we're all living here together, right? Or it's about a plant, whatever it might be. It's just opening ourselves up, right? That helps us move forward in a positive way. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insights today.
Thank you. And thank you to this platform for having me, us. Thank you.
Thank you, Josée.
We'll do it again for sure.
Yes, we'll see you next month.
Yeah, thank you everyone for listening.
At EduCanNation, we believe education is harm reduction. The more you know, the more you can enjoy the benefits of cannabis safely and effectively. To elevate your level of knowledge, join us next month as we chew the cud together on the many strategies available to transform your health and wellness with the support of our plant ally cannabis. In the meantime, visit educanation.info so you can follow us on social media, subscribe to our newsletter, or join our organization so you never miss a show, a series, or a soundbite. EduCanNation is a nonprofit dedicated to responsible cannabis education, working alongside a community of members, advisors, partners, and sponsors. Our mission is made possible by the collaboration of volunteers and the generosity of our listeners. If you've learned something from us, we invite you to consider supporting our work through a donation or sponsorship. Your contribution allows us to continue delivering unbiased, stigma-free, science-backed information, empowering you to make informed decisions that nurture the health of your endocannabinoid system. ECN Talks is brought to you by EduCanNation and the KGL Network. If you are interested in being a titled sponsor of the show, please reach out to us at educanationinc@gmail.com.